What do we want? Labeling. When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
All right, GMO, let us know. GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO,
Let us know.
GMO.
Let us know. Let us know.
All right, so my name is Eric Weltman. I'm the senior organizer with Food and Water Watch. Very proud to stand here today with Brock's residents and allies, Sniper, the Sierra Club, Consumers Union, GMO Free New York. We're here to call on Speaker Heastie to help fulfill a basic right to know what's in our food and what we're feeding our families. 2 days ago, Senator Bendito, chairman of his chamber's Consumer Protection Committee, advanced the GMO Labeling Bill to the Rules Committee. Now we need the Speaker's leadership in bringing the bill to a vote in the Assembly. This is a matter that has overwhelming support from New Yorkers. Over 90% of Americans support labeling GMO foods. Monsanto, however, does not support GMO labeling. Monsanto and its corporate allies, with their immense financial resources, are standing in the way of this important bill. Speaker Heastie must decide. Is he going to stand with New York's families or allow Monsanto to have its way? And now I'd like to introduce Aileen Shield from NYPIRG.
Good afternoon. My name is Aileen Shield. I'm the chairperson for NYPIRG, the New York Public Interest Research Group, and a Queens College student. NYPIRG is New York State's largest student-directed, nonpartisan, not-for-profit research and advocacy organization. I'm here today because students from Long Island and all the way up to Buffalo want GMO labeling. Without labels on foods containing GMOs, we are being stripped of our right to choose what foods we buy for ourselves and for our families. There is currently no FDA safety approval process for GMOs, and yet grocery items with GMO ingredients have proliferated grocery store shelves. About 80% of bagged, bottled, and boxed and canned foods in the United States are estimated to contain GMO ingredients, such as high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin, citrus acid, and glycerin. Overwhelmingly, Americans want mandatory labeling of genetically modified foods. According to polls by Consumer Reports and the New York Times, over 90% of consumers want genetically engineered foods labeled. Labeling food is commonplace. We have labels for all sorts of information like organic food, gluten-free items, and nutritional content. Labeling items for genetically modified food would allow consumers to decide whether or not they want to purchase these products. It's a consumer right to know and a consumer's right to choose. The U.S. lags behind 64 countries, including the European Union, Australia, Japan, China, Russia, and India, that already require GMO labeling and can keep consumers informed about what is in their food. In the United States, Alaska, Connecticut, Maine, and Vermont already have labeling laws, and New York must follow suit. Students working with NYPIRG from all across the state have written letters, made phone calls, and met with their elected officials to urge support of New York's labeling GMO bill. We call on Assembly Speaker Heastie to move forward with A.617A to the floor for a full Assembly vote before the end of this session because we're tired of dining in the dark. If it's GMO, it's our right to know. Thank you.
GMO, let us know.
GMO, let us know.
GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know. GMO, let us know.
GMO, let us know.
I'd like to now introduce Stacey Arell, the coordinator for GMO Free New York.
Hi, I'm Stacey Arell, GMO Free New York, and I also serve as the campaign coordinator for the New York State Coalition for labeling. All New Yorkers deserve to know what's in their food, no matter what their income level is. It doesn't matter if you're from the Bronx, Buffalo, or the Hamptons. All families should have the right to decide for themselves whether or not they want to feed their families GMOs. GMO labeling would cost less than a penny a day per person, but the price of not knowing what we're feeding our kids is simply too high. Why are we letting a company like Monsanto, the chemical giant responsible for poisoning us with DDT, PCBs, and Agent Orange, control our food supply and our knowledge about what's in our food? More importantly, why are those we've elected to represent our interests in Albany letting Monsanto and the big food companies dictate our food policies? It's time for Assembly Speaker Heastie and the Senate's GOP leadership to stand up for consumer rights and let us know if it's GMO. It's time to bring Bill A.617A S 485A to a floor vote before the session ends. We're sick and tired of dying in the dark and having corporate interests trump public interest. Last time I checked, Monsanto, Kraft, Kellogg's, and General Mills weren't constituents of any of our New York State legislators, but all of us here today are. And the 40,000 New Yorkers who have signed petitions in support of this labeling bill are also. So listen to us, not them. Make GMO labeling the law in New York.
What do we want?
GMO labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want? Labeling. When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Labeling.
When do we want it?
Now.
And I want to introduce Chuck Bell from Consumers Union. Before I do, I just want to mention we have some students coming by. Hello, just want to let you know we're out here trying to encourage our legislature to give us the right to know what's in our food and to label genetically engineered or GMO food. GMO! GMO!
Let us know.
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 All right, Chuck Bell from Consumers Union.
So I work for Consumers Union in Yonkers. We're the nonprofit organization that publishes Consumer Reports magazine. And I'd like to thank this coalition, NYPIRG, Food and Water Watch, and Natural Resources Defense Council, and many other partners for your hard work on this issue. This is now the time of the year when we really, everything's come to a crunch. We're trying to make democracy work. We're trying to ensure that the voices of the 90% of consumers who want GMO food labeling will be heard in Albany. And if we don't win our issue in the next 2 weeks, it might be another year before, or 2 years before GMO labeling can go into effect in New York State. So food justice delayed is food justice denied. This is the moment where our legislators need to choose by bringing this bill to a vote and giving the consumers the right to this information. As was mentioned earlier, we label food for all kinds of different reasons, whether it's pasteurized, whether frozen, reconstituted, homogenized, and so forth. When it comes to genetic engineering, we're talking about a fundamentally new technology that may have many unexpected effects. It's being deployed and put in the marketplace in many different forms. We have genetically modified fish, salmon that may be coming on the market, genetically modified apples, and these products are really raising the visibility of the issue to the point where consumers are saying, We no longer want to dine in the dark. We want this choice. Now, our opponents, the biotech industry, the pesticide industry, the Farm Bureau, and the consumer products companies, they're telling a lot of scare stories about this bill, and they're trying to mobilize legislators by telling them the bill will drive up the price of food. We at Consumer Reports have found that is not the case. We estimate it would cost less than a penny a day per person for GMO labeling. So the cost is really negligible. And because we are egalitarian and democratic people, we believe everyone in every neighborhood in this state should have the right to this information in all types of supermarkets, not people that just shop at luxury markets like Whole Foods. And so that's why it's important that in a democratic society that people get the information about the genetic engineering of our food. So we'll stand with you and continue to fight on this issue. You should know that there are 72 co-sponsors in the Assembly and now 23 in the Senate that want this legislation passed. So it's not just us, it's many elected leaders in New York State want this bill to come to a floor vote in the Assembly and the Senate, and we're exercising our constitutional rights to petition the government for change. And I thank you for standing up in the finest traditions of this country. This is the only way we've ever gotten any consumer rights in this country, is for people like us to stand up and fight for what we need. So thank you so much for your leadership, and forward to victory. We want what the state of Vermont has, GMO labeling. It goes into effect in 2016. Why should New Yorkers have to wait? It's time to have GMO labeling here in New York State.
So folks, I do want to quickly acknowledge we also have some supporters from Northwest Bronx for Change, a wonderful ally on a number of issues, the fight against fracking, and here supporting labeling GMO foods. All right, so I think we're going to conclude with another sort of round of chanting, and let's make sure the big guy, as you may be aware, is actually in the office. He walked in about 15-20 minutes ago, so let's make sure he hears us. What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Labeling!
When do we want it?
Now!
GMO! Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO! Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
GMO!
Let us know!
All right, thank you.